Good afternoon. We are here with Bacheyor, world scholar on Islam in the West and historian. We were here together, where I called her the Pope, she's my Pope anyway, back in 2007, where we discussed Islam in the West. Today, I'd like to talk about something else that you have been working on. The book that's in Italian and is coming out in English, Towards the Universal Caliphate. I think the Ambassador John Bolton is writing the foreword.
Yes, he promised one. I am very grateful to him.
And what we'd like to talk about today is how the West is enabling the encroaching, or I should say the galloping Islamization of the West. Okay, the first question I have for you is, how are Western authorities advancing the Islamization of the West, the encroaching Sharia?
Well, I can only speak about Europe, because in America the situation is quite different. But in Europe there has been since 1970s, when there was a strong development of Palestinian terrorism. There have been arrangements, dialogue, engagement between the European government and the countries of the Arab Leagues. So this type of dialogue and complacent relationships,
yes,
where the European countries accepted the request of the Arab League countries, has developed, have spread in Europe. Lots of Muslim cultural centers, and also has encouraged Muslim immigration, which is of course promoting and bringing the development of mosques, because you cannot have a big population without the mosque. If you agree to have an important immigrant population, you have to give them their religious rights.
Right.
And this means also the Arabic lessons, Arab institutions, and so on and so on. So we could have seen since the 70s until now a progression of an Islamization and Arabization of the West, without the European populations being aware of it, and especially that these arrangements were organized at the level of the cultural center, the university, the media, and so on. The dialogues between Western European university and Arab ones, all those arrangements have been done without the knowledge of the populations. So one of the aspects, therefore, of the Islamization of Europe is immigration, of course, demographic immigration, which brings Islamic culture. The other element is multiculturalism. The European governments have promoted multiculturalism without having this important problem discussed with the European population. And another element, another important factor is globalization. Globalization means that the sovereign countries lose their own sovereignty on many aspects and accept global governance, which come from the EU, the United Nations, from the United Nations. So this we see, for instance, that the United Nations regulations are more and more imposing themselves and ruling the countries, the Western countries, Western European countries. And I found this a danger because the OIC, the Organization of Islamic Countries, is having always increasing influence on the United Nations and on the United Nations rulings. And therefore, I think that it is a danger for democracy, because the European people are losing the control they have on their own politics, because they cannot control, they cannot decide what is going on in the United Nations, and their own democratic institutions are weakened by the development of the United Nations domination and rules. So the populations don't know what is happening. They have lost the control of their own policy and their own future within the movement of globalization.
Yes. Now, I did a series of articles on the Euro-Med partnership. Now, isn't the Euro-Med partnership a continuation of this policy, where basically you're opening up the floodgates to Africa, freedom of movement? I don't expect Europeans will be going there. I expect Africans will be coming into Europe without paperwork. I mean, it's opening up the floodgates to immigration.
Yes, of course. This was the beginning of the globalization, if you want, process. It was restricted to the Mediterranean region. It was Europe and the Arab Mediterranean countries.
Right.
So this has created a syncretic, a hybridization of the Judeo-Christian culture and the Islamic culture. We see more and more that in Europe, a kind of hybridization, Islamic hybridization of the Western culture, so much so that the European Union renounced to what is the pillar of its identity. It is the Judeo-Christian identity, and it refused to recognize it in order to accommodate Muslim immigrations, Muslim immigrants in Europe. So you can say that there is, in fact, this Mediterranean society where there is a symbiosis, but the symbiosis is more in the Islamization of Europe than in the Westernization of the Islamic countries.
Yes.
Because we see that the OIC, the Organization of the Islamic Country, is now working in order to root the Islamic world in the values and tradition of the Quran and the Sunnah. So to make it even more Islamic. It is not going toward us, toward Westernization, but the new development of in the future of the Islamic world will be toward more Islam and more radicalization, while the OIC requests from the Western countries and Europe that it becomes multicultural. So, in fact, it is asking from us what they refuse to do in the Islamic countries.
And America joining the Alliance of Civilizations, which to my understanding is something of a proxy to the OIC, the Organization of Islamic Conference Countries, I saw it as very disturbing news. I was wondering if you could give us your take on America joining the Alliance of Civilizations.
Yes, well, the Alliance of Civilization is a very huge organization, which is, as you say, a proxy of the OIC. its main concern, as it stated in its report written in 2006, is to bring together the Western world with Islam. So this is one of its main focus. So how to do it? Well, it promotes the projects of the OIC. We know what the OIC is requesting from the Western world, and it's the Alliance of Civilization. It's the mouth of the OIC. Now, on the other hand, of course, it is important that, especially in the age of nuclear weapons, that we avoid wars and conflicts, because they will be very dangerous. However, we have to recognize that we are now engaged into a conflict, which is a jihadist conflict. And the West must get out of its culture of denial and lies, and acknowledge that terrorism is in fact a war, a type of war. And it has to ask the OIC, the Organization of the Islamic Countries, which is an umbrella organization for the 56 Muslim countries, and which yielded enormous power. So it has to demand, to request from this organization that it has to make also some steps in the direction of the West. It is not only the West that has to renounce to many of its principles and of its own identity in order to meet Islam, but it has to be a cross-direction process, that both must go toward one another. Otherwise, if only the West is doing all the efforts, the West will become already a demi-continent, a demi-society, a demi-culture.
Yeah, and just for people that are not familiar with the term dhimmi, because you are the leading expert on it, you coined the term Dhimmitude.
Yes.
And Euradia too, that was yours. Just for the people, explain Dhimmitude, explain the Dhimma, just so that they understand what it means.
Well, the Dhimmitude is the civilization that was developed by the population, the non-Muslim populations that were conquered by jihad, because jihad is not just any war. Jihad has an ideology, yeah, and has its ruling, its jurisdiction. And this jurisdiction imposed on those populations a total subjection to the Islamic rulers, and also imposed some rules to which the non-Muslim must abide and must apply. And among those rules, it is the fact, the prohibition to criticize Islam. So, if you cannot criticize only one religion, this is absolutely contrary to our principles, yes, in the West, because everything can be criticized.
Yes.
And especially that Islam is together a religion, a law, and the politics. So if you cannot criticize the politics of Islam, and that Islam wants to Islamize you, so this means that you are neutralized. You cannot defend yourself.
Neutered.
Exactly. So, and this is in fact a tendency that we can see in the OIC with the policy of denouncing so much Islamophobia in the West, the policy of accusation of Islamophobia is in a way also a mean to neutralize, a political mean to neutralize our defense. And we have to be aware of that.
Yes, and people are not aware of it, and the media is aligned with the terror force because it's part of the obfuscation. It's very confusing to people.
Yes, it is very confusing because, first of all, the Western world, and I must say also many Muslims, do not know the Muslim Sharia, the Muslim jurisdiction. They don't understand that, this rule. They don't understand what is the blasphemy law, for instance. What are the Sharia laws? They don't understand. So for them, all this is something they cannot fight against because they don't understand what it is. But also many Muslims don't know that, and for them they can consider that the reaction of the West to the adoption of certain Muslim custom can be Islamophobic because they don't know the background of this history. They don't know the history of jihad, for instance.
Right.
So, because the Islamic view of history, the Islamic interpretation of history, is only according to Sharia. And this means that Islamic history is perfect.
It's correct.
And there was nothing wrong. Jihad has nothing wrong. This is why we cannot criticize jihad, because everything is perfect. So we have a conflict, an argument, even on words.
Yes.
What is jihad? What is terrorism? We cannot even say to criticize jihad.
No.
For instance, we also cannot criticize Islamic justice. We have to say, we have to know that Islamic justice is the justice according to Sharia. But as we cannot abide to this interpretation of justice, because it means Sharia promotes the cutting of the lambs, also crucifixion in case of apostasy, and many other aspects. So this is not justice for us. We have another definition of justice. Justice is equality of men and women. It is equality of all human beings. It is based on the Ten Commandments. It is based on the Enlightenment. It is based on a lot of other principles which are not based on Sharia. Right. So when we speak about justice, even this word has different meaning.
Yeah.
When we speak of peace, it is different. It has different meaning. Peace in Islam is peace according to Sharia. Peace for us is contrary to what it means in the Sharia.
Now, you saw that the counterterrorism advisor to President Obama said that jihad was a legitimate tenet of Islam. Isn't this very dangerous? Isn't this more obfuscation?
Yes, of course. This is because this is according with the Islamic vision of its own history. Jihad, because it is a war to expand the religion of Islam in the world, is a perfect and just activity, because it is done according to the Quran request and command. So it cannot be wrong, because everything which is Quranic is perfect, because it comes straight from Allah. You cannot criticize.
Right.
So jihad is according to Muhammad activities and commandments. So if us, the Western world, which have been for 13th century the victims of jihad, which is a very barbarous and violent war, and we cannot criticize this war, and we say it is perfect, it is good, so then it is self-defeating.
Yes. Now, what do you think of the political significance of the Islamic delegitimization of Judaism and Christianity?
Well, I think that this, of course, goes with the Islamic belief that considered that Jews and Christians have falsified the only religion, which is Islam.
Right.
And which consider that the Hebrew history and the Hebrew prophet were Muslim prophets, including Jesus, that Jesus was a Muslim prophet.
Yeah, they ran that on the bus ads. Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
So so in this case, if the Bible is the history of Muslim before the appearance of Muhammad,
Yeah.
if we have falsified in our Bible, First and Second Testament, the real message of Islam that was preached by the Hebrew prophet and by Jesus, then we have falsified the real religion, and therefore our historical conception on Israel and Christianity are all false, because the biblical story is not a Jewish history, it is a Muslim history, according to the Islamic view.
Right.
So this is why Israel has no legitimate right in its own country. So we see here that Christian cannot, if they are Christian, they cannot accept that Israel has no legitimate national root in the land of the Bible, because the Christians have accepted the First Testament. It is part of them, their own religious identity.
Yes.
So if they renounce that, and if they accept that Jesus was a Muslim prophet who preached Islam, they renounce therefore to Jesus, the Hebrew Jesus, the Jewish Jesus. They renounce to, in fact, their whole Christianity. So we have here a very important religious conflict, which we haven't yet discussed with the Muslim world. And until they recognize the legitimacy of our own religious history and identity, and they renounce to Islamize our history and assert our history, I don't see how we can get together. We cannot have an agreement. Another problem is that the Muslim says that all children are born Muslims.
Yeah.
Therefore, they see us as apostates. And because we are born Muslim, you see, in principle.
I understand.
And so there are all those aspects that usually the Western public do not acknowledge, do not know. So that this conflict, which is very complicated because it has theological, political, legal aspects, historical aspects, is not understood.
But how are you going to get them to recognize the legitimacy of Judaism and Christianity when their whole religion is based on falsifying it? It's like when I discuss expunging the Quran of its violent texts. The problem that I see, and you are the world's leading historian on Islamic anti-Semitism, it's very much a part of the doctrine, is it not? Can you discuss Islamic anti-Semitism with us for just a bit?
Yes, well, it is. It started, of course, with the problem of Mohammed, because Prophet Mohammed, wanted to Islamize the Jews first. He believed that he was bringing a message in conformity with that of Judaism, and he thought the same with Christianity, that they would be accepted by the Christians too. But then in Medina there was a big Jewish community, and they, of course, they didn't accept his ideas, and because also he didn't know much about the Bible, and therefore there was a conflict, and Mohammed got rid of the Jews there. It is well known. One of the tribe, he expelled them. Another tribe, he expelled and took all their belongings. And the third one was massacred, and the Qurayza, and also the children and women were taken in slavery. But then he continued his war against the Jews who lived in the other oases in Arabia, and then there was a continual conflict, because Muhammad thought he was bringing the real Bible, that the Quran was the real Bible, you see, and therefore, and we still have this conflict now.
Yeah.
That this is why the Muslim says that our Bible is a falsified version of the Quran, of Islam. You see, so there is in his conflict with the Jews in Arabia, and in his war against the Jews, of course, he developed verses were revealed, which direct him to wage war against the Jews. And anti-Semitism, or Judeophobia, rather in this case Judeophobia, developed very strongly from the war of Muhammad against the Jews there. And then it was taken through the biography of the prophets, who were published 2 centuries later, and in the Hadith, which are the sacred scriptures of Islam. And it was there given an institutional and legal form, the status of the Jews and the Christians. And therefore, since they are considered sacred, so we have a whole body of sacred Islamic ruling, which are extremely Judeophobic and also anti-Christian, because often what was said to the Jews was said about the Christians, and the Christians are also considered even worse than the Jews, and these people don't know it, because they are called as idolaters, pagans.
Idolaters, right.
Yes.
Yes.
Or associationists. This is the people who associate other gods to one god. So, in fact, and also because of the war that developed later with the Christians, against the Christians, so the history, Islamic history, and legal institutions and rulings have a whole body of anti-Jewish, anti-Christian, also anti-pagan, important, baggage.
Yeah.
And this absolutely, if we want the peace of civilization, this must be examined.
Now, how would you say that the U.S. now, along with the EU, is advancing Islam in the West?
Well, because this is the root in the ideology of refusing war. The EU was built on the refusal of any war in the nuclear age. So it has adopted an accommodating and engagement policy with the Muslim world in order to avoid conflict. But also, there are also other reasons which are based on economic needs, since the Islamic world has an enormous reservoir of energy.
Right.
So, the economic reasons and the desire to have good relations with the Muslim world, and the renouncement of one's own identity, which is very strongly developed in Europe, but not in America. But this maybe will come, because the European want, because in Europe we had a very strong Nazi, leftish, communist tendency, which was anti-European and anti-religious. So because of this historical baggage, Europe didn't mind to renounce to its own identity, especially if it was Judeo-Christian identity, which it rejected, and it went into the agreement with the Islamic world. Now, we see with this Obama administration, the leftist administration, the democratic one, we see the same vision. It is an ideology. It is the desire to create a world, a peaceful world, where there won't be any boundary, religious boundary, national boundaries. Everyone will be together, the brother and sister. But I think that hell is paved with good intention, and that this is it is not a very realistic vision. We have to see that we have enemies, and we have to know why there are enemies, and we have to deal with enemies. If we want peace, we have to deal with enemies. We cannot pretend that we have no enemies.
So what should the Western governments, what should the US, what should Europe be doing?
Well, I think, I speak now about Europe. I think what we see in Europe is a development of a conscious of all those problems. Now,
you're becoming aware of it.
Yes, on the grassroots, the people.
Yeah, the people.
Yes,
we love that.
Yes, like for instance, those who support Geert Wilders.
Yes.
And there are others like that also. So people are bringing pressure on their governments to force them to listen to them, because after all, those governments are elected in order to take care and protect the wish of their citizens,
yes,
not to make dealing with Arab countries and to arrange for a huge Muslim immigration. So they are now forcing the governments to take their responsibilities. And if they are incompetent, because the leaders of the governments are there to serve, and this is very strongly developed in America, they are there to serve the people,
yeah,
not to serve their pocket or their own ambition. So there is much more demand now which are done on the leaders, and they have to listen to their own people. Now, how to do? Ask the European people, and this is also in the very much now discussed. We have to know what is our identity. It is based on what? What are the pillars of our identity? And we have to know what are the principles on which we will not discuss. We will not abandon the principles, the democratic principles, the principles of our democratic freedom, of our rights. We have to know what are they based and what we are ready to fight for. And I think that all this is being discussed now. And everywhere in Europe, in different places.
But when you have the signing of the Lisbon Treaty, the last country which didn't want to do it, Czechoslovakia, but when Ireland fell, which was surprising because they had just voted the prior June against it, doesn't that somewhat vanquish national sovereignty?
Of course, but this has even woken up more the European people.
The Lisbon Treaty?
The Lisbon Treaty, because they realized how the leaders are doing policy behind their back and without the approval of their own citizens. So there are many people who reject the Lisbon Treaty, many people who reject the EU, the European Union. They want, of course, what the unification, the integration of the different countries of Europe has very positive aspects. It's a very great things, but there are discussions about what is the EU. It is a supranational body that has confiscated the national sovereignty of the people, and which is engaging into globalization in a big way, and in a way that the citizen cannot control. They lose the control of their own future and their own society. So all those elements are being discussed now. And all this with a huge Muslim population in Europe, which is linked with the OIC,
right,
which is acting in a contrary way to what the citizens want. So the situation is becoming very conflictual in Europe. Now you don't have in America this situation because you are one country, you speak one language. It is different.
No, we're experiencing something different. I mean, my book is coming out in July, The Post-American Presidency, and the Obama administration's War on America. And really, a basic tenet of the book is how Obama is abandoning American sovereignty, relinquishing it to international law. We're seeing that increasingly, which we find very, very troubling. And he seems to not give a whit about the Tea Parties. I mean, I know that they are smeared in the media as millions of racists, which we know this is what they do to us. They call us bigots, as racists, Islamophobe, and so on and so forth. But how do you see it playing out in America? Because he's very Islamophilic. You see this?
Yes, of course, he said it. He said that a change. He wanted change in policy.
Yes.
And he wants to engage the Muslim world. So he wants to go with them, toward them, to please them.
Yes.
So it is clear that his policy will be on this base.
Yes.
So what I see it is that, of course, with globalization, with which is the engagement with the Muslim world, which is a process within the globalization. So this, of course, will lead America to relinquish some of its sovereignty. It is for the American to decide where they want to go, what they want to keep, how they will manage within globalization. It is a very complicated problem, because we are going to a new world now, especially with the exchange, excuse me, with the exchange, with the big immigration movement, with also the communication, facilities of communication. So what we are going, we are losing the past, the secure past, and we have to build the future. But with what and how? And it is a very destructured world that we have now, at least in the West, because I don't think China has changed. The Muslim world, on the contrary, is building itself. This is why I called it the caliphate, because the Muslim world now is getting a very strong organization, which is the Organization of the Islamic Conference, which has many instruments, internal instruments, and which it has its own court of human rights according to Sharia, its own international tribunal according to Sharia also, and several other bodies. And it, as it had said in several of its statements, the OIC want to build the universal Ummah. This is the Muslim worldwide, yes, on rooting it in the Quran and the Sunnah. So it is not like us, which are destructured. We don't know where is our identity. We are full of guilt because of this, because of that. They have a very strong position, and they are, according to their text, they want to create a Western Islam which is linked to the universal Ummah, and will a Western Islam linked to the universal Ummah, and which will be organized and coordinated through Muslim schools, Muslim teaching, and Muslim centers,
and the media also.
Muslim in media, all that coordinated throughout the Western world. So we shall see this emergence of a Western Islam which will be very strongly rooted in its original values, the Quran and the Sunnah, within a Western world which is corroding, which is totally decaying. And which is even doesn't reproduce itself. It is totally doesn't. The youth don't get married, don't have children. So demographically, we don't have a future if we don't reproduce ourselves. Apart from the problem that we have, the cultural problems and the problem of our own identity.
So this is, in addition to the books, which I'm going to list on the website, her books, which is seminal works, this is what you cover in your latest book on the Universal Caliphate? Is this what you discuss?
Yes, exactly that. What I am discussing also is that with globalization, the democratic process of government of each country are replaced by transnational networks, like in Europe the Annalyn Foundation, or on a worldwide scale, the Alliance of Civilizations. The Alliance of Civilization is a gigantic network that collaborates with several countries on different levels, which are political, historical, military, religious, on all levels, and which impact on the government of the countries through these networks. So in fact, democratic processes are replaced now by the work of transnational networks, like for instance the UN. The UN is a gigantic network.
Yeah.
If the UN give a ruling, well, it supersedes the rules, the laws of the country, of different countries, and it has to be accepted. It has to be follow up. You see. So we are now. I don't know about America, but in Europe, we are now determined. Our policy is determined and is obey to networks. Networks are by essence not individuals. There are lots of people who are working in networks.
Right. It's collective.
A collective. So you don't know, they are opaque. You don't know to whom you are. If you are not happy of something, you cannot go to a person and complain. So it is an inhuman, anonymous organization, Kafkaesque organization, which is going to rule the world. And all this because of the OIC organization and strength. All these networks are strongly influenced by the OIC. So the OIC is in fact getting more and more power into these networks that control our life.
But the idea of America, probably the most noble experiment in human history, the most moral government, it was based on individual rights. This is in our DNA. I mean, no matter how different we may all be, the basic idea of individual rights, the opposite of collectivism, the opposite of statism. I mean, Americans are going to feel this. And you see, Americans are not, while they may have been because everything was so good and so easy, Americans are not passive. I don't know that you'll be able to just snatch away this idea that it defines us. I mean, I don't know if America will save the world, but I don't know. But I don't know that they'll go quietly. Do you think they'll go quietly?
I hope they will not, because this will mean, because America is a very great country. It's really a pillar of Western civilization. It has got the best of it.
Yeah.
Also, it has many dark aspects in its own history,
yeah.
but at least it recognized it, and
Yes.
this is very important, because every nation, every people, every individual have a dark aspect in their personality and in their history. What is important is to recognize it,
right,
and to change it.
This is fundamentally what's wrong in Islam.
Yeah.
That you cannot, no candor.
You cannot
right.
criticize. So this is so America is a great nation. It has a tremendous potentiality. It has given a lot to the world, and of course, if America is going to follow the direction that Europe has taken,
and it seems to.
Yes. Well, it is. It will be very, very serious for our civilization, our principle, our values, and it will be a collapse of an enormous magnitude. But I must say that now in Europe there is a movement of. I wouldn't say revolt, but a resistant movement against that. So there is some resistance, at
right.
least. It doesn't mean that it will succeed,
right?
Because it is very difficult to go against what has been done for so many decades, and also to organize a political body that will know how to deal with those problems who are very complex.
Yeah.
On the level of a continent, because it is not in one country, it is in the whole of Europe. So it is on the level of a continent. But this has to be done if Europe, what Europe represents and the West represents, want to survive. Otherwise, it will not survive.
Will not survive. So the first thing, after 9/11, when I started this journey, because before 9/11 I was cognizant of really nothing, I came to see you at Columbia. Yeah. And I was so blown away by what your remarks had revealed. I had come up to you and I said, what do I do? Or what should I do? And you said to me, first, learn everything. It was the best advice I ever got. And I guess that's what people have to do. First, they really must. Yes. They must learn everything and not go to the usual resources that they go to, like the media, because the culture has been completely corrupted.
Yes, it has been corrupted and subverted.
Yes.
By the Islamic version of history, which is not ours.
Right.
Our version.
But we're accepting it.
Yes, we are, because our authority, our universities are imposing it.
Yes.
You see, in Islam, you say the Human Rights Declaration Islam says that the research of knowledge is permitted as long as it is done according to Sharia. So, according to Sharia means that you cannot criticize the Quran, you cannot criticize Islamic history, you cannot criticize anything really religious. It is a religious version of history, which is not compatible with our version of history, which is based on critique and of an critical analysis and examination of facts.
Yeah. No, there's no facts.
No. If you have to say that everything is perfect in Islam, so you don't really have to, and then the historical demonstration must be according to this conclusion that everything is perfect in Islam. So already you have the demonstration, the result.
Any idea when your book is going to be out?
Well, it will be out in French in October. Okay. And then in America, I am looking for the translation is not yet finished. Yes, I have to work a little bit on it.
So hopefully you'll come back and we'll talk again when it's out in English.
I hope so.
We want it to be a bestseller.
Thank
you.
Thank you
with Pamela Geller, Atlas Shrugs.
Thank you very much. Thank you.